Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to G Bear's Off-Grid Ways, a homestead in the desert. And today we're going to do a little fallback on the Harbor Freight shallow well pump. And why are we going to do that? Well, I had a question from a new subscriber, and he was looking to buy a bladder for one of these. And one thing that I found out about these is you can be fooled into thinking it's the bladder that's causing your problems. And I learned that from experience. This is my second pump. I've got another one up on the shelf. I'll be showing you that. It's inside the box that this came in, and I marked it as to when I checked it out and refurbished it, found out what was wrong. And I had the same thing happen to this one. So I'm sure it's an ongoing problem with these units, and a few other people have probably suffered that problem and think that the bladder is gone. They can't buy a bladder because Harbor Freight doesn't sell them anymore. And the reason that they probably stopped selling them is because they were selling them and getting them returned because it wasn't the problem. So they probably just took that off the list to get rid of the hassle. So let me explain some things to you. Okay, first of all, the bladder is inside of that tank down there. And the bladder has a large opening on this end, which is actually doubles as a gasket for that cover for the tank discharge. So the bladder is a rubber unit that's inside there, like a really heavy-duty balloon. And then on the back side, let me see if I can get in here. On the back side, you see that black plastic cap down there. That's where the Schrader fitting is, the Schrader valve, for adding air pressure to the tank. Now, the pressure for these things is supposed to be 23 psi. That's 23 pounds per square inch of air pressure. Now, you can not check that when the unit is full and at its peak pressure. You cannot go down there and try to add air to it. Okay, that you're going to cause a problem if you do that. Now, that being said, what you have to do is shut off your water that's coming into the unit at its source. And that's one thing that I would do differently in the future if I ever have to pull this one again and change it out. On the incoming, which would be this side with the valve on it, that's a one-way valve. It only lets the water come in. It can't go back out. And that's how your tank builds pressure and holds pressure. Because when the water's trying to blow back, it shuts the valve in there and it can't go anywhere, so it'll hold the pressure. Okay, now, the bladder does not take the air. When you put the air pressure in, it is not filling up the bladder with air. It's filling up the tank, the metal tank, with air. And that's putting a squeeze pressure on the bladder. The water is on the inside of the bladder. The air is on the outside of the bladder. Okay? So keep that in mind. And now what I'm going to tell you here is what I found out was the problem, thinking it was a bad bladder, and it wasn't. The things are really heavy duty. They shouldn't go out that easily, so it had to be something else. Okay, so the first thing that you want to do is, if it's not holding its pressure, and it just, when you turn the water on, it just runs and runs and runs and runs, it never gets up to pressure and gives you that few gallons of backup water before it has to run again, then you've got a leak somewhere. Okay, and it's not a bladder problem, it's a air leak problem. And what could cause that? Well, two things. one of two, well, actually three things. I found there are three things that can go. Okay, on the Schrader valve, on the back side over down there. On the back end of the bladder, there's a little rubber tab and a hole through the center of it. And what that does is it holds up the back end of the bladder so it doesn't lay down in the tank and cause a problem. It keeps it kind of centered in the tank, but it also doubles as a seal to keep the air from leaking out between the Schrader valve and the tank. Okay, so I think it was either a 7/16 or a 1/2 inch deep well socket. I just put it down there and used my hand alone. I didn't have to use a ratchet on it or anything. I just used my hand. Of course, I am pretty strong. And I just gave it a little twist and noticed that it did tighten up a little. So if that is loose, then air can slip out between that seal and the tank and drop your pressure. You'll lose your air pressure in your tank, thinking about a bladder has gone bad. So that could be the first thing. Now the other thing is, and you may as well check it while you're doing all of this, you see the bolts that hold this cover on there. Okay, the front end of the bladder, like I said, also doubles as a seal. So it's a giant seal that goes around that unit. Now I got down there and I put my wrench on there and found out that 3 or 4 of the bolts were not tightened properly. Now you don't want to over tighten them, but you do want to make sure that when you put the wrench on, it doesn't very easily turn. That's too loose. So vibration or whatever, I don't know what it was that caused them to loosen up, or if it was just the assembly in the factory wasn't done right. But I found 1, 2, 3, 4. The bottom, from this one around to that one, the bottom 4 were loose enough that I actually had to give them about 1.5 full turns to snug them back down again. Okay, now that would allow air to leak out from between the tank and the bladder. And if that does that, you're going to lose your air pressure in there. It's never going to hold pressure, so you can shut the water off, drain it down, and repressurize it, put the air pressure back in, and then within an hour's time, that's going to leak out again, and you'll be back in the same place saying, I need a new bladder. The bladder's bad. It won't hold pressure. It's a leak between either that seal and that seal. Okay? Now, the third thing that I found, after I got those fixed up, I said, well, there's always a little water on the board down there behind the unit. And I'm going, wonder where that's coming from. And I just think, well, that's a water leak, not an air leak, so who cares, right? Well, you need to care. If you see any water around your outside of your unit, you've got a water leak, which could also be an air leak and lose pressure. So mine was where this shark bite fitting went into the plastic. It was leaking in there, and I put my hand under here and pull it back out. Oh, I still got a little water there, so I'm going to have to take that apart and put some more sealer on the air, and also use some Teflon tape and the liquid sealer and get that resealed properly, because I'm going to be losing pressure over time on that if I don't. So that's another thing to check, is on your backflow or your incoming, when it goes to the back pressure, if you've got any water leaks anywhere along that line, that'll cause you to lose pressure also. And that'll cause your pump to cycle out of turn when you're not even using any water, but the pump will cycle. You also want to check all your faucets, hose bibs, that stuff. Make sure there's no leaks on any of those, because that'll cause a waste of water and pre-cycling of the pump. So I hope that helped you. For those of you who do have these pumps and have run into that problem, I bought this one because I thought the bladder was bad in the other one. And then I was going to try to find a bladder, which I did find on, I forget if it was eBay or Amazon, but I did find bladders for sale. And they weren't that expensive, but you're going to buy one, you don't need one. Check those positions where the bladder seals to the tank and make sure there's no air leaks there. You can also pump it up with air pressure with the water shut off and the unit drained down, all the water out of the outgoing pipe. You want it drained down, and then put your pressure in there, and then you could take soapy water or even just some Windex and spray it around those bolts and spray it around the Schrader fitting, and you'll see air bubbles. Then you've got a leak. All right, everybody, I hope that helps you. This is G-Bear reminding you, thumbs ups down there. Don't forget to share and subscribe. And this is G-Bear signing off.